Hi guys and welcome. This is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, artist, memoir writer, bipolar psychiatric survivor, and your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast, the place that offers an alternative perspective on mental illness, highlighting creativity, non-conventional healing, and breaking on through to the other side. If you are ready for a new narrative on the mental realm that celebrates crazy and cool without penalty, then Not As Crazy As You Think is for you. Hello, this is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast. So I'm back with my AI rants today. So there's a lot to unpack here, and a lot has happened since the last time I covered anything in AI, and I want to address how there has been an open letter that was published on March 22nd by the Future of Life Institute that is seeking a pause on AI experiments. And it's signed by a variety of very important people in the field, such as Apple's Steve Wozniak, Elon Musk, Emad Mostaque, who's the CEO of Stability AI, Tristan, who's executive director of Center for Humane Technology. He was part of the film The Social Dilemma. Max Tegmark from MIT Center for Artificial Intelligence and Fundamental Interactions. He's a professor of physics and the president of Future of Life Institute. And several other heavy hitters in the artificial intelligence field. Unfortunately, the big ones who would really make the big difference here are not signing, which would include people in Microsoft, in OpenAI, and DeepMind. So, this is an issue because, we have to have everyone on board for this to take off. Now, to go over some things in the open letter itself would be really interesting. It starts out with saying that according to the widely endorsed AI principles, advanced AI could represent a profound change in the history of life on Earth and should be planned for and managed with commensurate care and resources. But this level of planning and management is not happening. And they're saying, basically we're in this out-of-control race to develop and deploy even more powerful digital minds that no one, not even the creators, can understand, predict, or reliably control. And now that the AI systems are becoming human competitive at general tasks, that's how they describe it, they say we must ask ourselves, and this is quoted from the open letter, should we let machines flood our information channels with propaganda and untruth? Should we automate away all the jobs, including the fulfilling ones? Should we develop non-human minds that might eventually outnumber, outsmart, obsolete, and replace us? Should we risk loss of control of our civilization? And we're putting this in the hands of tech leaders that are unelected and are driven by an underlying thirst to get ahead so that they can eventually be the front runners of control. So it is a power race. Now, the open letter does not call for all AI development to stop. Okay? It's just training of AI systems more powerful than GPT-4 at this point. And they want all the key actors to make this public and verifiable. And if the pause cannot be enacted quickly, governments should step in and institute a moratorium. And it really has to be international. Now, here's the thing. There are plenty of people in the field who are poo-pooing this open letter. And that's to be expected because it puts a stop to their fun. I get it. But when nearly half of all AI researchers believe that there is a 10% chance, at least a 10% chance, that this moving forward quickly and continuing down the trajectory that we're currently on can lead to possible human extinction, maybe we should reconsider. It's just a thought. Now, one of the things that some people in the AI safety field or the AI alignment field are stating is that skeptics exist because they can't imagine an AI system developing motivations of their own outside of what they are originally created for. But we know, just in what we've already experienced with GPT, that this is possible, and we don't understand what is going on inside these systems, which makes it a black box. So until we're there and we can understand a little bit more about what's going on, it's clear that there are dangers on this road. Now, there are a couple of people who are considered, I guess, alarmists in this field. And one of them I love to hear speak. His name is Eliezer Yudkowsky. And he just wrote an article for Time on March 29th. And he also did not sign the letter, which I thought was interesting. But he just feels he's not signing it because 6 months is just simply not enough. And he wants to shut it all down. The article that he wrote for Time is, "Pausing AI developments isn't enough. We need to shut it all down." And I love the way he speaks because he speaks to, I guess, my sensibility. Eliezer is a decision theorist that has been working on the AI alignment situation for decades. And he is coming forward saying that, we are way too far behind. There are 30 to 1 AI development researchers to AI alignment researchers. And that's just not going to help us catch up to where we need to be. Now, what is AI alignment? AI alignment, basically, it's the concept that as these AI systems become more powerful, they have to have the same values as humans in order for us to coexist and to have our concerns, our values, our interests at the heart of its decision making. Now, that could be, something that we strive for, but in the end, if you're really looking at where this can go, just in how we treat animals, that's a cause of concern, right? I mean, we treat animals in a certain way. We eat them, right? We eat them. Okay. Just so that we know, we're living on this planet, right? So this is something that my visions have pointed out to me. And I don't want to get into that because they're so crazy, but it's how I ended up in the hospital the last time. This is one of the reasons why I have this deep-seated need to keep talking about this stuff. Because when I was talking about it in 2017, nobody really cared. But that was the year where AI changed. And they went into a huge leap, which Tristan Harris pointed out in this particular video that he just made 1 week prior to ChatGPT-4 being released. And it is an incredible video. I will link it in the show notes. It's titled The AI Dilemma. It was released on March 9th by the Center for Humane Technology. And Tristan Harris and Asa Raskin are the co-founders of the Center for Humane Technology, and they were, again, involved with the social dilemma. Now, the two of them go about and they explain how these existing AI capabilities already pose these catastrophic risks. Okay, so it's really interesting because they go through the history of why sometimes in advanced technology development, whatever it is, it could be nuclear warfare, it could be biotechnology, these things have to be slowed down because everything else has to catch up. With new technologies being created, there's a responsibility on the technologist's part to make sure that there are regulations that are developing at the same time. And, that's a responsibility on their part because They know the systems. They know what the flaws are. They know the weaknesses. They know where these things are going. So this is something that really needs to be taken on by the AI world. One of the things that they mention is that if an engineer of a plane told you that 50% of their team knew that there could be a 10% chance of that plane going down, would you step onto the plane? Period. Absolutely not, right? So why are we all on the AI plane? It's going to, where the trajectory is showing us, it's going down. So one of the things that they mentioned is that prior to 2017, there were a lot of different AI areas. There was speech recognition, computer vision, speech synthesis, robotics, music generation, image generation. And then in 2017, they all came together under one umbrella. So in the past, when they made progress in their development, it was incremental and it was all categorized. But once it all became fused into a language model, a large language model, and that again started occurring in 2017 and it really perfected in 2020, then it became everything was synthesized and it all became one. So you have all of these areas of development working on one thing now. So the exponential curve ends up going up much faster. So they go further in an incredible way, explaining what is really the new, I guess, the real difference between this new class of generative large language model AIs, okay? And they actually give them a little nickname of Golem AIs, okay? They have these emergent capabilities their programmers didn't program, where the creators don't understand how they show up, when they show up, or why they show up. So what they found is, as they kept training these models, it's when they get to a certain size that's when they don't know how these emergent properties actually come into being. For instance, they may train the AI using the entirety of the internet with several different languages, but they're really only training them to answer questions in English. But then at some point, they realize as they increase the model size, it starts to be able to answer questions in Persian. And no one knows why. That's just an example. So this is something that's happening. And if it's happening, that is a red flag. Because if the best researchers are working on this and it's starting to do things that they don't understand, what's to say that that's not going to happen again and again to the point where they really truly lose control? Tristan Harris tries to bring it back into the context, explaining that nukes don't make stronger nukes, but AI makes stronger AI. And it's like an arms race to strengthen every other arms race between people making bioweapons or people making terrorism or people making DNA stuff. AI makes better abilities to do all of those things. So it's an exponential on top of an exponential. And then Raskin mentions if we were to turn this into a children's parable, we can say that give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. But teach an AI to fish and it will teach itself biology, chemistry, oceanography, evolutionary theory, and then fish all the fish to extinction. We're at a crossroads and we really need to take this seriously. The Pew Research Center just did a survey on how Americans actually feel about AI applications. And there's a variety of views on this, but I'll just go over some that were pretty interesting. While 57% of people are very or somewhat excited about AI performing household chores, there's only 9% of the people who are very or somewhat excited about AI knowing people's thoughts and behaviors. And there's 75% that are somewhat concerned about that. And as other things come out, such as what if AI is making the important life decisions for people? There's only 9% of us who really are excited about that, while 74% are somewhat concerned. So if we're really taking everybody's views into account, maybe we should be doing that more, maybe we would slow down. But one of the reasons why we can't slow down is because the people in charge of these systems are driven by the god of Moloch. Now, I want to go over this a little too, because I think that there's people talking about this concept, and it's really worth reviewing. Moloch was actually the god in a Bible story. It's referred to a few times in the Bible. And essentially, the god of Moloch promised power to those who would sacrifice their own children in order to gain more power. So Moloch is the god of child sacrifice, the fiery furnace into which you can toss your babies in exchange for victory of war. So basically, he always and everywhere offers the same deal. Throw what you love most into the flames, and I can grant you the power. So, this was also found in the movie Metropolis, the 1927 film, who consumed the workers to keep things running. And later, Allen Ginsberg in the 1960s wrote a poem about Moloch and pointed to capitalism as being the modern god of Moloch. Later on, Scott Alexander dissected Ginsberg's poem in a really interesting essay, and I'll attach the link to that essay in the show notes. And he discusses the race to the bottom scenarios that come about through the dark forces of game theory and coordination failures. And the idea is not everybody wants to give in to the Moloch god, but if you want to stay competitive, you need to give in to this unhealthy god of competition, whether you like to or not. And in the game, you're forced to keep up. And you're not dumb or evil, but you go along to compete. Because if you don't go along, you're surely going to not be able to compete. So this essay written by Scott Alexander called Meditations on Moloch, which was written in 2014, during which, AI safety was still in development and people just thought it wasn't even like that important of a thing and criticized it for possibly hurting the innovation and development of the field. But, he discusses how there are good people who find themselves to be motivated by the god of Moloch. And it's an entrapment thing because we are racing to the bottom where everyone ultimately loses. But because of game theory, everyone knows we have to stay in the race. Otherwise, we definitely will lose. Everyone hates the system, but for lack of a good coordination mechanism, it endures. So in order to stay in the race, they need to keep playing. And, the god of Moloch always existed in all sorts of political and economic systems, all throughout history. But capitalism is set up so that the god of Moloch can really flourish. And he writes, I know that capitalists sometimes do bad things isn't exactly an original talking point, but I do want to stress how it's not equivalent to capitalists are greedy. I mean, sometimes they're greedy, but other times they're just in a sufficiently intense competition where everyone who doesn't do it will be outcompeted and replaced by people who do. Business practices are set by Moloch. No one else has any choice in the matter. And the thing is, we will keep giving ourselves over to the god of Moloch. He says, even until the last value we have to sacrifice is being anything at all, having the lights on inside. With sufficient technology, we will be able to give up even the final spark. And he sums his essay up with, quote, everything the human race has worked for, all of our technology, all of our civilization, all the hopes we invested in our future might be accidentally handed over to some kind of unfathomable, blind, idiot alien god that discards all of them and consciousness itself in order to participate in some weird fundamental level mass energy economy that leads to it disassembling Earth and everything on it for its component atoms. Now, this concept is being thrown around in the AI community a lot. This woman who studied astrophysics and actually ended up going into becoming a professional poker player, which is pretty interesting. Her name is Liv Bowery. She now has a YouTube channel, and she talks about these kinds of win-win situations would be like anti-Moloch. She has a very interesting video right now that's out and getting popular where she interviews Daniel Schmachtenberger, who's a really interesting commentator and a founding member of the Consilience Project, aimed at improving public sense-making and dialogue. And his interests include ways of improving the health and development of individuals in society with a virtuous relationship between two as a goal. And he has a particular interest in topics of catastrophic and existential risk, which obviously this AI moment that we're in right now is presenting. It's a fabulous video. You should definitely check it out. And it's very complex and complicated. But, a few things that he does bring up is that we are already dealing with a superintelligence. I mean, if you think of a superintelligence as an entity running the world that is not aligned with human values, that has a small value metrics, we're already there. It's our world system, and AI is about to accelerate it. And the actual entities that are most positioned to push AI into the, existential risk future are run by Moloch itself. And they can't get out of the race. And as I mentioned earlier, the main entities with the big GPU farms, they are not signing this petition and they're moving forward. So with this already misaligned superintelligence running the world and the AI revolution, we can't pull the plug. They're autonomous. And so the nature of the risk is already happening. He says AI has the capacity to optimize across a lot of fields, but everything it could optimize, it could also break. For instance, AI that can do protein folding for oncology can also create bioweapons. And even if they create the AI for something specific rather than general, once they lower the barrier of entry, anyone who can use it will use it for what they have incentives for. AI is different than all the other Molochian entities or structures that were erected before because it increases all the other risks in the way nothing else has before. And the total complexity of this is beyond our ability to process the solution. His main advice is we should figure out alignment first, but first solve the alignment within our own general intelligence system, which embodies capitalism, game theory, and our social structures of today. He mentions how this has happened before where we faced catastrophic risks, but not necessarily globally. Now, that's prior really to the nuclear proliferation. And when that happened, that was the first time that we really had to look at the technology and said, ho, let's hold on and slow down. He feels that instead of worrying about advancing narrow metrics, we should be worried about the wider metrics. And it's critical that we do this in order to either prevent the breakdown of life support, so you get a catastrophic result, or the breakdown of the quality of life, which would lead to dystopia. So his call to action is to engage in the wider risk analysis because the speed and the irreversibility of AI is just too great. And he suggests that all AGI companies should kill the fiduciary responsibility to maximize profits for its shareholders because in the end, that's the main objective function. right, of these super intelligences, if we want to call them corporations or whatnot. If we have problems with the fundamental infrastructures that are putting these systems out there, how are we necessarily going to get right with the alignment issue? Because, humans aren't very good at doing proper alignment for their own institutions. We're not good at it. We're not good at aligning things that are good for the goal of all humans, right? We're not good at that. It's always been a situation of optimizing and incentivizing for winning short-term goals while ignoring long-term outcomes. I mean, that's how corporations ended up treating the environment. You could see it how they're willing to do mass cutting of their employees just to maximize profits for their shareholders. It's always been the type of thing that as long as the corporation thrives and survives, anything that could be thrown into the Malachian fire will do. But long-term wise, with the dawn of AGI, this mentality can't sustain itself. And he says, go as fast as possible is not the right answer when there are so many risks involved. Another really important voice in this conversation is Max Tegmark. He's a Swedish-American physicist, cosmologist, and machine learning researcher who's a professor at MIT. And he's the president of the Future of Life Institute and had a lot to do with composing the letter, the open letter. And he was also recently on a really good podcast with, again, Lex Friedman. I'm definitely going to put a link to that because I learned a lot about the letter through him speaking about it with Lex, and it was just to be released like that day. But his point of view is so interesting because, listen, he's an AI researcher, so he has been involved with this movement from the beginning, and he understands that there's a lot of good idealistic people who really believe that bringing AI into AGI will reap enormous benefits for all of humanity in ways that we can't even imagine. So while that's still a real possibility, with that kind of gain, right, there could be a potential equal loss if you go down this road so haphazardly. And he is very aware of this, along with many of his fellow colleagues from the Future of Life Institute. He mentions how the progress on AI capabilities has skyrocketed since the era where they were just beginning to talk about AI safety in like 2014, 2015. And yet at the same time, the policy making to form some kind of regulation around this kind of capability is going so much slower. So that's where the problem is. You have so much capability and so little regulation and so little oversight of this and understanding of what's going on. I mean, this has been compared to the printing press, the Industrial Revolution, nuclear capabilities, and now even the Google CEO Sundar Pichai, said that AI will be more powerful than fire and electricity. We need to weigh his words. The change is going to be exponential, and let's not close our eyes to this. It's something that we need to walk forward with our eyes open. And it's funny because Max Tegmark just put out this morning another article in Time magazine entitled "The Don't Look Up Thinking That Could Doom Us with AI." And it refers to that movie, Don't Look Up, which did really well in Netflix and came out in late 2021. I think it was even nominated for some kind of an award that year. And, scientists love it. I loved it. And, it says a lot about human beings. He says that since we have such a long history of thinking about this threat and what to do about it, from scientific conferences to Hollywood blockbusters, you might expect that humanity would shift into high gear with a mission to steer AI in a safer direction than out-of-control superintelligence. Think again. Instead, the most influential responses have been a combination of denial, mockery, and resignation, so darkly comical that it's deserving of an Oscar. So, yeah, it's happening, the denial. Recently, a Microsoft paper argues that GPT-4 already shows sparks of AGI, and others say that GPT-4 basically passes the Turing test, which was once viewed as a test for AGI. And the time for AGI and superintelligence, he says, may not be very long. According to a reputable prediction market, it will probably take less than a year. Superintelligence isn't a long-term issue. It's even more short-term than, for example, climate change and most people's retirement planning. Okay, that's a little scary because I'm 52 now. So it's like, wow, I'm thinking about retirement. But here's the thing that people don't understand. It's not like the science fiction scenarios, although my science fiction story about this will definitely contain, the evil robot. It's more likely something that it's almost like an accident, like an afterthought. He writes, if superintelligence drives humanity extinct, it probably won't be because it turned evil or conscious, but because it turned competent, with goals misaligned with ours. We humans drove the West African black rhino extinct, not because we were rhino haters, but because we were smarter than them and had different goals for how to use their habitats and horns. In the same way, superintelligence with almost any open-ended goal would want to preserve itself and amass resources to accomplish that goal better. Now, there's this whole concept. I'm not going to get into it because it's technical and complicated, but the idea is, what if they turn into like paper clip maximizers, right? The idea behind that, and Nick Bostrom made this popular, is that, you can have this entity making all the paper clips that it needs because that's its objective function. But then it starts like literally taking any other material that it can use to make the most paper clips in the universe. So you could say, well, look, AI did all this and ignore the possible risks. But it's like saying, oh, look, great. Look at all these paper clips we have. It's not really making much sense because we're not considering the human being anymore. And I saw this mentality kind of burgeoning during COVID. I said, you know what? People really don't care that people are dying. I mean, I know that I lost a family member during COVID, so I knew it was real. So for people to just put up blinders and say, well, I don't care, you're taking away my haircut, it's the same kind of mentality. So there's basically like no plan, and the industry, he says, has collectively proven itself incapable to self-regulate. They violated all the rules, the necessary precautions. For instance, the don't do list for powerful AI might start like this. Don't teach it to code, don't connect it to the internet, don't give it a public API, and don't start an arms race, all of which we've violated. So we really we're not on the right track, okay? We're not on the right track. He says, I'm part of a growing AI safety research community that's working hard to figure out how to make superintelligence aligned, even before it exists, so that its goals will be aligned with human flourishing, or we can somehow control it. So far, we've failed to develop a trustworthy plan, and the power of AI is growing faster than regulations, strategies, and know-how for aligning it. We need more time. Well, I don't think it's a big deal to ask for more time. I mean, what are they rushing for? Just more paper clips? Some of the main things he talks about in his letter, the policy recommendations that came in addition to the letter, were as follows. 1, mandate robust third-party auditing and certification. 2, regulate access to computational power. 3, establish capable AI agencies at the national level. 4, establish liability for AI-caused harms. 5, introduce measures to prevent and track AI model leaks. 6, expand technical AI safety research funding. 7, develop standards for identifying and managing AI-generated content and recommendations. I don't see that there should be any problem with that. And yet there is. And that's a further problem, which he's trying to point out. That it's gotten this much controversy. And at the same time, only about a month later, there's over 25,000 signatures. And I even include my own in that. So hopefully it goes somewhere. But from what I'm hearing, it's not going that far. The good thing is people are having the conversation. And that, to me, is always the beginning. But he said most politicians are not even on the radar. You know, we're building a species that are smarter than us, and, you know, what then? You know? And yet he does give us a hope because, you know, listen, the Soviets and the U.S., we forgot. I mean, I was alive during the Cold War, so I, you know, remember the fear that we had. But we talked about it, and there were people who were having the conversation. And because we saw that this could be a potential catastrophic event if we should have nuclear war and it would affect everybody on Earth, there were arms control treaties, and it helped control the race. And yes, there was still pressure to create the nukes, but, you know, we limited it to 9 countries. But he also says on the Lex Fridman podcast that there's so much commercial pressures from the shareholders that he felt that the open letter is a way to kind of help these sectors pause, because no one's going to do it on their own. Because if they pause and the other guys don't, then they're not able to stay in the race, right? The Moloch race. So he wants to help the techs try to do the right thing. And I'm really happy for it. He said it was possible to slow down human cloning. That's still a true deal. And in fact, all this worry about China, you know, well, what if we stop and China's going to move ahead? Well, you know, China proved that they were the ones that stuck to following through with their regulations on the germline editing of the human genome, because they put their own researcher away in jail when he violated that in 2018. So this idea and this pushback that we can't stop because China will get ahead, the Chinese government likes control. And China has probably some of the strongest AI regulations around right now. And the EU is moving to a close second. And the US is just like, whatever. You know, it's so clear that we're going to be behind in this because of Silicon Valley. But Max says this isn't an arms race. It's a suicide race where everybody loses. If anybody's AI goes out of control, it really changes the whole dynamic. Now, the main guy, Eliezer Yudkowsky, is one of the big voices against all this. And as I said, he had written on March 29th in Time, pausing AI developments isn't enough. We need to shut it all down. And I do want to go back to that article for a moment, because he just recently did a talk for the Center for the Future Mind. And TED just is recently putting out a new AI series and invited him to speak as well. So this is all just like happening. And so his voice is still important, even though, you know, some people calling him an alarmist. But he just feels we are not ready. And because it's Murphy's Law, stuff that they try in terms of alignment, they might not get it right on the first time. And through the rules of regular science, unlimited time is what you have. And you make mistakes and then you continue the scientific process. But this isn't, we can't do science in that way with this. If we mess up once, it's over. So to get it right the first time is unlikely. It's never been done before in science that you get things right on the first try. And this time there's global competition. And in the end, no one wins the AI arms race except AI. You know, somebody in the talk asked somebody, because he was speaking to a bunch of students as well, and, you know, somebody asked him, like, well, what was so different years ago when you first started this research? And he said, well, 20 years ago, deep learning was not a thing. AI was not done in the way it is today. Today, these AI that are developing are giant inscrutable matrices, he says, that it's a black box. You can't see what's inside. You don't know what's happening. They were hoping during this time period that there was a possibility that they would understand cognition better, which, as we know, they never figured out. They never figured out human cognition. I mean, that's the failing of psychiatry, right? Claiming that they have figured something out and they figured nothing out. And basically, the capabilities are generalizing faster than the alignment. Basically he says, if we were to create AI so that they could be worthy descendants, that's not necessarily something you get for free or by rushing towards. You have to work at it. And the pacing is not on par for where we're at. So in his article, he writes, many researchers steeped in these issues, including myself, expect that the most likely result of building a superhumanly smart AI under anything remotely like the current circumstances is that literally everyone on Earth will die. Not as in, maybe possibly some remote chance, but as in that is the obvious thing that would happen. It's not that you can't, in principle, survive creating something much smarter than you. It's that it would require precision and preparation and new scientific insights, and probably not having AI systems composed of giant inscrutable arrays of fractional numbers. And he says, without that precision and preparation, the most likely outcome is AI that does not do what we want. And really not care for sentient life in general. He says, visualize an entire alien civilization, thinking at millions of times human speeds, initially confined to computers, in a world of creatures that are, from its perspective, very stupid and very slow. How long do you think they're going to be confined to computers? I mean, they are working on engineering these major artificial womb factories. I mean, they are working on this. They want the robots to make themselves. He says, we have no idea how to determine whether AI systems are aware of themselves either. Since we have no idea how to decode anything that goes on in this giant inscrutable arrays, and therefore we may have some point inadvertently created digital minds which are truly conscious and ought to have rights and shouldn't be owned. So that's a thing, right? Because we don't even know really what consciousness is. So we can't say, well, they're conscious, they're not conscious. We don't actually know. The reason why he didn't sign it is because he feels that 6 months is not enough. He criticizes Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, who was gloating about the new Bing, making people come out and dance. And he says this is not how the CEO of Microsoft talks in a sane world. It shows an overwhelming gap between how seriously we are taking the problem and how seriously we needed to take the problem starting 30 years ago. We are not going to bridge that gap in 6 months. And again, he says, trying to get anything right on the first really critical try is an extraordinary ask in science and in engineering. We are not coming in with anything like the approach that would be required to do it successfully. If we held anything in the nascent field of artificial general intelligence to the lesser standards of engineering rigor that apply to a bridge meant to carry a couple of thousand cars, the entire field would be shut down tomorrow. Which means they are pretty loose with how they do things. Taking lots of risks, as he knows. Many researchers working on these systems, he says, think that we're plunging toward a catastrophe, with more of them daring to say it in private than in public. But they think that they can't unilaterally stop the forward plunge, that others will go on even if they personally quit their jobs. And so they all think they might as well keep going. Moloch, as I've been talking about. This is a stupid state of affairs. And an undignified way for Earth to die, he says, and the rest of humanity ought to step in at this point and help the industry solve its collective action problem. Well, I thank all of these people who are in the forefront of having this conversation. I feel less crazy every single day that I move forward. I know that we have some tough times ahead. And as I said, with the nightmare visions that I have had, and I was gifted with them because I couldn't really have attained that information prior to this time period unless it was visionary. It's falling right in line with what's going on here. And I don't want to reveal it. I'm just going to have to put in some kind of quote-unquote fiction. Hopefully, if I should soon get an agent or publishing contract, that will be book 2 for sure. And I'm just... As I said, I'm thankful for people who are willing to stand up for this conversation to be had. And hopefully, as we move forward, there'll be more people willing to engage in the conversation. And it really has to come, I believe, also from all areas. It doesn't necessarily have to be all doom and gloom. But can you possibly imagine how disabling and hopeless we will feel when there are things that are going on around us that nobody will ever understand why they are going on around us, because there's some kind of objective function that this entity is committing to. The end can be closer than we think. It could be the moment when AAGI is achieved. We might just have days or even hours. So use the time you have. That's what I can say. Use the human time you have left in charge of your own life, in charge of your own thoughts, in charge of getting information from sources that you can understand. Use the time you have and make living worth it, no matter how long you're able to remain human on this planet. Thanks for listening to Not As Crazy As You Think, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember, mental health is attainable for anyone, especially those labeled with mental illness. Until next time, peace out.